Now, your mate and yourself, that really becomes a great opportunity for you to learn how to love and help one another. First thing I would say is that you're going to have to approach this on an equal basis. That is to say, it has to be your project together, and it's as much for your mate as it is for you. It's going to be very difficult if you approach it with one of you thinking, well, this is his or her project. Or even if it's in a good spirit, like I'm going to help him do this, or I'm going to help her do this. You need to understand that as people who are put together in one flesh, you grow together spiritually. And there is a great limit as to what either one of you can do without the other one entering into it. And there are tests of where you are, like, can you really pray together? And what is your prayer together like? What do I mean by that? I mean things like when you pray together, are you very relaxed? Is it very natural? Do you feel loving toward one another as you pray together? You know what I mean? I mean really loving. I think prayer time together between a man and a woman that doesn't end with a kiss needs to go a little deeper. Yeah, a hug, right. Absolutely. Both of them. You know what Paul and Peter say about man and woman relationships is so deep and important, and about how we are to really love one another according to knowledge, as Peter says. And the emphasis is nearly always placed on the man's initiative in seeing to it that this happens, that the man understand the woman, and that the woman be put in a position of helping the man, but not in any subservient sense. You remember, Paul says that the woman is the glory of the man. I think that's right. And so there's a very special kind of relationship there that we need to start with, and then work out from that. And then now when you start with your disciplines, you will find that some of you don't need what the others need. So it isn't necessarily good that you do the same thing, is what I'm saying. Right? One of you will be more inclined to study than the other. Very often it's the woman. Very often the man doesn't study well, and perhaps there's no reason why they should. It may be the other way around. It depends upon the individuals. Remember that you're going to give to one another, so that your gain in whatever discipline you're engaging in will be something that will redound to the benefit of the other. So it's a non-exclusionary kind of relationship. Needless to say, I trust it would not be one in which there's competition, though frankly it sometimes becomes that. But that's just one of the things you need to work out as you go along. So a lot of understanding, deep commitment to one another's growth spiritually, and to the freedom of the other to be different in whatever practices you may be engaged in. But some of them, like worship and celebration, those are times when you really do need to be able to come together as well as be apart in your disciplines. Now, sometimes this is threatening. The disciplines are threatening because, for example, you find people who are insecure in their relationship and they don't want the other person to be away. They don't want the other person to be in solitude or silence or something like that. And that's where each person has to be very sensitive to what they are doing means to the other person. You know what I mean? How they're picking it up. I think I quote Jessamine West in this book about she's a writer, and she says every solitary rebukes someone. See, when you go into solitude, it is almost impossible for the other person not to experience that as rejection unless there is a real understanding. And rejection is probably the ultimate meaning of hell, is rejection. It's bad. It's bad stuff. Even if it's not real, it's bad. So you have to be very careful and work around that. Give one another a lot of freedom. Be sympathetic and sensitive to one another. Also, be prepared to be with one another and learn how to do that in ways you haven't known. And there are other issues with children, for example, that we might talk about too. It's how do children enter into things? And I would say one of the greatest things you could do for your children was be able to live with such naturalness, with spiritual disciplines, and the spiritual life generally. And I really want to emphasize the spiritual life is not just the disciplines. And I really like to emphasize the way this is worded. Disciplines. I don't even like the word of, but I like it for the spiritual life. And perhaps one can be too picky about those kinds of things. But disciplines are not the spiritual life. They are for the spiritual life, and obviously they interact with the spiritual life. But one of the greatest things you could do for your children would be to naturally, of course supernaturally as well, just lead them into a way of living which would be different and stronger and helpful, so that they would naturally be introduced into interaction with Christ and learn how to live their lives and deal with the motions of sin which are in their members, because as soon as they hit the world, that begins to jump around in them and teach them how to deal with that. For example, if you watch teenagers, they are so subject to the pulls from their peers. They are just almost totally victimized by them. And to have a teenager who knows that it's okay to be alone, that's a great, great triumph. Not just for you, but for your teenager. I mean, the gang phenomena that you see they have gangs in Wichita? Sure you do, because we ship them out here from Los Angeles, I know. Kansas City, right? The Bloods and the Crips? Yeah, Bloods and the Crips. I just suddenly remembered reading that after I asked the question. But you don't need to get garish about it. The cliquishness, often the heartbreak, even the suicide of teenagers, because they cannot handle being alone, living their lives alone. And to be able to understand that they tie into God, that there is a relationship with people which is not based upon the kinds of terrifying relationships that adolescents have to endure, is a great gift to them. So many things there to be discussed, but that's a few sketchy words about it. Yes.